Hello and welcome to today's webinar on addressing gender imbalance in construction. I am just going to take you through a couple of housekeeping and a bit of a running order today before passing you over to Aileen. So this is an interactive session and we are keen to hear your thoughts throughout. If you'd like to ask a question or leave a comment, click on the questions in the control panel and type in your question and press send. There will be a couple of poll questions. These will appear automatically on your screen and you'll be given around 30 seconds to answer. During our discussion, if you would like to share your thoughts, please raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button and we will unmute your mic. If you would rather not speak, you can type in the question tab. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, so please take time to contribute and answer all questions and comments and feedback forms at the end. So a bit of information about the DIveIN programme. So through the DIveIN training and development programme, we want to give businesses the tools and skills they need, whatever stage they're at, to establish or enhance their diversity and inclusion offering to staff. The 12-month programme has been developed in partnership with Equate Scotland. With SMEs accounting for around 95% of Scotland's construction industry, the programme has been specifically tailored to provide them with the advice and guidance to implement real change. While COVID-19 has shifted priorities towards industry recovery, the DIveIN programme will support and encourage businesses to promote diversity and inclusion, ensuring that it remains an important topic of 2021 against the backdrop of Brexit and the challenges of lockdown. The programme will include a series of 12 workshops, discussion forums and virtual events, all focusing on raising awareness and sharing best practice from organisations large and small, including any crossover with academia. I'll now pass you over to Aileen. Aileen works for Equate Scotland, Scotland's national expert organisation in gender equality in science, technology, engineering and the built environment. Aileen supports employers recruit and retain women into their organisations. She joined Equate in 2018 to establish Equate Career Hub, a job board designed for employers to find qualified women within STEM. Passionate about moving the dial of gender equality in construction, Aileen has worked on several projects in the sector, working with CSIC, Sir Robert McAlpine and the Scottish Building Federation. So I'll now pass you over to Aileen.
Excellent. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today and thank you for that introduction, Kirsty. I'm just going to share my screen. Excellent stuff. Can everybody see that? Okay, so hello and welcome to Addressing the Gender Imbalance in Construction with CSIC and Equate Scotland as part of the DIveIN series. This session is going to look at workplace culture. But before we begin, what I wanted to do is I wanted to start with an icebreaker, because I know it's just after lunch and I wanted to get feedback and get some conversation started. So in front of you, you'll see 4 objects. We've got rocket fuel, we've got a dishwasher, we've got windscreen wipers, and we have caller ID. And I wanted you to have a little think about what all these objects have in common, and either use the chat function, the question function, or if you would like to raise your hand to say out loud what it is that you think these all have in common. And I'll just give you guys a couple of moments. To provide Does anybody have any ideas? So I'll put you all out of your misery. And each of these objects were invented by women, right? So American inventor Mary Anderson invented the first windscreen wiper in 1903. Josephine Gary Cochran was an American inventor who invented the first commercially successful dishwasher, which I think we can all agree we thank her for. She actually said herself, if no one else is going to invent a dishwasher, a dishwashing machine, she was going to do it. So yeah. Mary Sherman Morgan invented rocket fuel, or she invented a type of rocket fuel called hydrogen, and that sent the first ever satellite that was orbited by the United States. And then finally, Shirley Ann Jackson was an award-winning physicist, and she contributed quite a lot to the telecommunications industry, and she invented caller ID and putting someone on hold. And I just wanted to find out if you guys could think of anything else that women had invented, just off the top of your heads. If you want to put it into the question function, that'd be great. Or if you wanted to raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can contribute that way. So I'll just move on, but actually it can be quite difficult to think just off the top of your head inventions by women. And I don't know if it would surprise you, but in 2019, less than 9% of patents were filed by women, and that was across the whole world, which means that we are living in a world that is created and is designed by men. And there's one of the reasons why what we do at Equate Scotland is to address the gender imbalance in science, technology, engineering, maths, and the built environment. And one of the reasons Equate Scotland exists today is because of what we call the Leaky pipeline. So we often use the metaphor of a leaky pipeline when describing the participation of girls and women in STEM. This is because at an early age, boys and girls have an equal interest and ability in STEM-related activities. However, participation and confidence begins to drop off at particular stages. And we actually see the highest drop-off of participation around age 14, when girls are beginning to make their subject choices at secondary school. The reasons for this are quite complex, and we're not going to really talk about these today. However, they do include influences such as social stereotyping, parental influence, and peer pressure. Of the girls who do study STEM subjects at secondary school, only a small proportion of them will go on to study STEM at further or higher education level. So, for example, in Scotland, only 16% of engineering undergraduates are women. Of the women that do graduate with a STEM qualification, in Scotland, 70% will not remain in the industry on a long-term basis. This represents a huge waste of talent, not only for investment in education, but also for the future of Scotland's economy. It is quite important to say at this stage, though, that people do change careers all of the time for different reasons, and men also drop out of STEM as well. But that figure is at around 48%, and that is also an issue because it is quite high. But there is something going on there around why women are leaving at greater rates than men are, which is why we're going to talk about how to keep women in the sector. But as we get along to the end of the leaky pipeline, with numbers of women already being very low, it will come as no surprise that only 12% of managers in STEM are women. And that means we get to the point where only 25% of women make up Scotland's STEM sector. The area that we're going to look at today is focusing on how to retain women and how do we create positive workplace cultures so women don't want to leave and we can have a thriving STEM economy. So we're going to do a poll. I'm going to go on and talk about a little bit more about construction in particular. But can I ask for the first poll, please? and it should pop up on your screen. So the first question is, women make up what percentage of the construction sector? Around 33%, 24%, 15%, or 5%? And the results are in. Oh, and the second poll. Oh, you're viewing me. So the results are in, and 65% of you said around 15%, which is correct. Can we move on to the second poll, please? So women make up around what percentage of trades roles in construction? Around 16%, around 10%, 5%, or 2%? And over half of you are correct. So women make up around 2% of tradesperson roles in the construction industry. So we have a huge gender imbalance in construction, clearly, with women making up only 2% of tradespeople and less than 2% of modern apprenticeships in construction. And at the current rate of progress, we're not going to reach gender equality in the construction industry until 2194. So we're not even going to be here to see that happen. But it's not always been this way. 25,000 women worked on the construction of Waterloo Bridge during World War II, and it wasn't until the men returned from war that women were moved out of construction and manufacturing. A similar thing actually happened in technology. So the first computer programmers were women, as it was considered an admin role, and it developed. And as the industry developed, women were locked out of those roles as soon as it was viewed as an occupation for men. But it's not all bad. There is progress being made. So FTSE 100 construction companies of board members who were female rose in 2011 to 30% in 2017. So that's really great. We're also seeing really great pioneering programs that support women into construction roles. So Women City of Glasgow College pioneered a Women into Construction course that has been really successful and has seen a 100% increase in the number of women participating in construction trades at City of Glasgow College. And we're currently going through COVID-19, which has many, many challenges, but the normalisation of flexible working is bringing a lot of innovation to organisations and will bring a lot of new talent to allow people to work in sectors that they haven't considered before. But why does it even matter? Well, despite there being a growing skills problem that can be addressed by recruiting a wider group of people, diversity, and it's the right thing to do, but diversity is good for business. So Cloverpot conducted research that highlight a correlation between diversity and decision making. This was not only gender diversity, but also age and racial diversity as well. Research that by the McKinsey Institute that supports this shows that where women are represented at senior management levels and board level, there was a correlation with an improved return on investment and profitability. So there's also a lot of evidence out there to suggest that businesses are much more resilient in times of economic uncertainty, as we are seeing just now. Where there is a diverse range of perspective represented, we see much better decision making, we see problem solving, and we see innovation that is fit for purpose. So that's why we need, or that's the business case for it. But actually, I think what's really important is what happens when we don't have diversity. So does anybody on this webinar own an Apple product? You can put that into just a simple yes or no, either into the chat function or into the questions function.
While we're waiting for those answers to come through, someone has asked if you could explain STEM before we go any further.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, so STEM is science, technology, engineering, maths, and the built environment.
Great. Hopefully you're seeing those results coming through just now. Mostly yeses, but a few no's in there as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. So the reason why I asked this is just because Apple is a product that we all own, right? Or a lot of us do. I actually don't own an Apple product, but a bit smug about it. But in 2013, Apple released the Apple Health app. So that was a white square with a heart on it. You guys might be familiar with it. And it was marketed as the all singing, all dancing, all inclusive app that could track every single aspect of your well-being. It tracked your steps, it tracked your sleep, it could even track your cholesterol and your mental health. But they missed something quite important when it came to health. And I was just wondering if anybody in the webinar knows what that would be. Yeah, so Emily Carr has said menstrual cycle, and she's absolutely correct. So they didn't include an all-inclusive health app that included periods. It had no way to track something that affected up to 51% of the population. And to not include this as a key part of an all-inclusive health app was a real mistake. So what do you think happened next? Well, they got huge backlash, and women all over the world noticed this. And what it really did is it showed the fact that they were really not thinking about women, or there were no women in the room when they were developing this. And Silicon Valley is notoriously male dominated. If there had been a woman involved, or women had been consulted in the design or the testing of the product, it's actually quite unlikely that this would have happened. And they wouldn't have had any reputational or financial damage, because essentially what happened is they had to provide an update a lot quicker than intended. But another example that I like to use is around crash test dummies. So it wasn't until 2011 that crash test dummies were designed with women in mind. Before then, crash test dummies were used as the average 50 percentile male. And this meant that women were 17% more likely to be killed in an accident, and they were 47% more likely to be seriously injured. And even in 2011, when a female crash test dummy was introduced, they were only used in the passenger seat. And I don't know about all the women in this webinar today, but when I drive my car, I drive in the driver's seat. So it does make me question the safety of these things. And then finally, bringing it back to the situation that we're going through today, 77% of the NHS workforce is made up of women. However, at the beginning of the pandemic, PPE was not designed to fit women appropriately, putting them at greater risk of catching COVID. PPE for women may be a challenge you have come across either in your career or within your organisation. It's something that we do come across when we discuss creating positive workplace cultures for women into construction, because it is really a part of not just about creating a health and safety culture, but also creating a positive workplace culture too. So I've kind of covered why we need to address the issue at hand and why we need diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So now we're going to talk about how to create it through an equality, diversity and inclusion culture. So the first thing to talk about is what is company culture. So company culture can be defined as a set of shared values, goals, attitudes, and practices that characterize an organization. Okay. An equality, diversity, and inclusion culture is a culture that refers to policies, practices, and social norms within that organization that enable all employees, regardless of their gender, their sexual orientation, ethnicity, or background, to be valued and respected equally. Equality is about ensuring everybody has equal opportunity and is not discriminated against because of any of their characteristics or who they are. Diversity is about taking account the differences between people and groups of people and placing a positive value on those differences. And then finally, inclusion is about ensuring every single person is valued and respected. An ED&I culture is about employees being able to bring their whole selves to work. But I do often think it is easy to say what it is, but knowing what that looks like can be difficult to envisage or articulate quite a lot of the time. So I wanted to relate it to something that the construction industry shares, and that is a health and safety culture. Health and safety culture is shared across the industry and already has robust policies, practices, and expected behaviours associated with it. So this is when I want to bring in your thoughts and your discussion. And I want you to take a couple of moments to think about a health and safety culture. I want you to think about what does this look like, who is responsible for it, and whether you have seen it evolve over time. And if you could please either put your thoughts into the question tab, or if you could raise your hand and provide some of your thoughts around this, that would be really good. So just so Kirsty and Danielle at CSIC know, I can't see the chat function just now. I'm finding it difficult to be able to see that.
I'll share some responses with you then, Aileen. So we've had PPE, site measures and protocol.
Yep.
We've got everyone is made aware and responsible of health and safety. And we've got everyone involved is responsible.
Yep. Those are great. Thank you so much. Do we have any last minute contributions?
No, we've just got some people saying that health and safety is a priority, and I think it's a general consensus that everyone is kind of maybe responsible for themselves, but no one. If you could maybe elaborate more on the responsibilities, that'd be great.
Cool. So to do that, I'll move on. So thank you for all for your contributions, and they're definitely in line with what we think a health and safety culture might look like. So you guys have all talked about every single person is responsible for upholding health and safety in the organisation, and that is of utmost importance. But other things to come with that says health and safety always comes first. Stopping work for safety concerns is not met with any negativity because safety comes first. Communication on health and safety, I have always found in a construction organisation, is clear and it's consistent. Management plays an active role in demonstrating safety as a priority. Policies and practices on health and safety are reviewed and improved on a regular basis. And these are based and informed upon those carrying out the work. Would everybody here, from a construction sector perspective, would you guys all agree with that? Or is there anything missing? Yeah, Barbara's saying she would agree with that.
Yeah, there's lots of people saying they would agree.
So before we go on to ED&I culture, with that in mind, I want you guys to have a think about what would a positive ED&I culture look like, having thought about what a positive health and safety culture looks like, first of all. I'll just put the previous slide on.
Could you just repeat the question again, Aileen, please?
Yeah. So I want you to think about, given we understand what a health and safety culture is, what would an ED&I culture look like? How would you create a positive ED&I culture using health and safety culture as an example or as a starting point? How would you then translate that to equality and diversity and inclusion?
We've got some people saying management leads by example, EDI is formally recognised like health and safety is. And then we've got people from a wide range of backgrounds all working together and having a voice in the cultural running of a practice. Ensure diversity is at every level of the industry, so everyone is aware of it and everyone can contribute to it.
Absolutely. All of those things are really great contributions there. So using health and safety, using a health and safety perspective, because we all kind of understand that, an ED&I culture would look very, very similar, only with equality, diversity, inclusion at the beginning, at the center of it. So equality and inclusion would always come first. Calling out or addressing any discriminatory behaviour or inappropriate behaviour would not be met with any negativity, it would be taken seriously. Communication on equality and inclusion will be clear and consistent. Every single person in the organisation is responsible for upholding an equality and inclusion culture within the organisation. Management will play an active role in demonstrating equality, diversity and inclusion as a top priority for the organisation in the same way that they do for health and safety. Policies and practices would constantly be reviewed in regards to equality, diversity and inclusion, and these should be informed by people who are carrying out the work, so essentially your employees. So we do quite a lot of work with women in STEM, and people often come to us with experiences that they have had, and they're not always really positive experiences. So in front of you are 8 statements, and I want you to read these, and I want you to tell me how many of these statements do you think have been experienced by women in construction. So just a number from 1 to 8. So I'll read them out. A university lecturer consistently stopped his class to check if I understood. I got a first class, so there's no reason why he should single me out. I turned up to site to be asked if I was here to do the dishes. There was no female toilets on site. I was referred to as a bird. A female senior manager told me the only reason a director liked me because I look like a younger version of his wife. Hearing my managers when drunk talking about how women were bad for business because they have children. Seeing naked pictures of women in a site office. and I was sent sexual text messages from a male colleague on a summer placement while I was at university.
We've got most people saying that all of them, they think.
And can I also just ask, how do you feel about seeing these? Are these something that you've come across before? Is this expected? How do you feel about that?
We've got a few people saying this is normal and unsurprising. They are all pretty offensive, and they are all normalised behaviours, so unacceptable and yet mostly laughed about. So yeah, I would say mostly agreeing.
Mostly agreeing. So would you guys be surprised to hear that this was experienced by one individual? One individual experienced all of these things working in the construction sector. Is this a surprise to you guys? Getting a mixed response. So the reason I have included this in this presentation is to demonstrate that it's quite easy for us to talk about concepts of equality, diversity and inclusion. But when we talk about this, what we're really talking about is people's experiences in the workplace and how they feel in the workplace and how they are treated in the workplace at the end of the day. So it was just to bring the concept of equality, diversity and inclusion into the reality of what that might look like. So when we talk about culture, an academic called Ed Sheen, MIT School of Management, defined culture in this way. He separated it into 3 different levels. He talks about culture being made up of artifacts, which are visible elements and structures that everybody should be able to see. He then talked about espoused values, and that's what the organisation says about what they do. It's about the conversations that you guys have. They're less visible, but they're a part of your everyday. These include your strategies and your goals, etc. The basic underlying assumptions are all the unconscious beliefs, personal values, and thoughts and feelings that occur within an organisation. This is sometimes referred to as unconscious bias and are sometimes the unintended consequences of either certain policies or practices which often get in the way of creating change or unintentionally have different results. If you think about your company culture as an iceberg, we can see that only in this iceberg, only a small piece of the iceberg is visible and the rest is underwater. So only 10% of an iceberg in the ocean is visible and the rest is underneath. Artifacts are what people see at the top. So this might be your vision, your mission, your policies, how you externally present your company, and your strategy. Everything else is kind of hidden underneath the water. And people spend a lot of time concentrating on the visible elements of how you're seen by others, rather than focusing on the unseen elements of workplace culture. And these are the areas you tend to have to address the most. So you have to address how people feel in your organisation, unwritten rules, relationships, people's fundamental needs when they're at work as well. And this can be really helpful when you're trying to address different elements of workplace culture. So if you want to look at one aspect of your workplace culture, so for example, we use flexible working as quite a good example for this. So you introduced flexible working as a policy in response to COVID-19. And this is to help with people manage COVID-19, whether that's with childcare, with other caring responsibilities, or just generally to manage their lives. So the visible element would be the actual flexible working policy. But then underneath the water, you need to look at how do people feel about the flexible working policy? Is there potentially negative feelings towards the process? Do people perhaps lack confidence to ask for flexible working? Maybe there's a lack of role models or others in the office who work flexibly, so maybe your senior management team don't do that. And then there might be the actual process, so people might be unsure of how to pursue flexible working. So how do you ask for it? What is the process, and what does that look like in practice? So with this presentation at the very end, we have a PDF handout that is essentially the cultural iceberg model, and you can use that to have a look at different aspects of your organisation where you would like to make some changes, what it is that you can look at the top. So what are the visible elements that you need to address? What are then the underlying concerns or underneath the iceberg that you need to look at? So those will be handed out at the end. But while we do have to have a look at our iceberg for specific policies and practices to look at, we also we should look at how do we lead an ED&I culture. And that's quite important to recognise that we all live within a wider society that has its own societal norms and expectations. And a lot of the time, our society doesn't always act in an ED&I culture, which is why robust policies and processes to protect some groups or address certain situations are really so important. And to do this, to lead by example is really important. So it's really helpful if that you as a leader in ED&I, if you see an issue arise, your organisation or people within your organisation know how to respond to different situations, and they feel empowered to be able to take this response. Others then are able to see that this is being addressed, so they too also feel that they see that the behaviour is unacceptable in your organisation. And then over time, what you'll do is you'll create a culture of diversity, acceptance and support. It's hugely important that people will be able to address inappropriate behaviour or discriminatory behaviour or any behaviour that goes without the status quo, without fear of negativity, and that's hugely important in creating a culture of ED&I. But ultimately, everybody wants to know, how can we transform cultures? And we only have a 60-minute session today, so we won't be able to go in huge details, but it's really important that the starting point is that we need to be honest about the change that is needed. Consulting with your staff is a really good place to start. And it's really important not to make assumptions that everyone has the same experience of company culture. There may be blind spots where you didn't consider, there may be issues that you didn't know were taking place, and you must take everyone's experiences on board, and you must take them all very, very seriously. Sometimes you can't make the changes straight away or address the experience entirely, but acknowledging these and being honest about them in the first place is a really important place to start. It's also important to employ a range of strategies. There is no silver bullet. I cannot tell you if you do these 5 things, you will transform your company culture. But some of the things that you might want to do together to take a holistic approach would be to include activities such as reviewing your recruitment practices and other policies and procedures. You might want to deliver unconscious bias training or training to your whole organisation. Engaging in outreach activities with students in schools and local communities. Or you might want to implement a leadership or development programme for women or other underrepresented groups. And doing all these together will help you transform your culture, will allow you to recruit underrepresented groups such as women into the organisation and then keep them there. But anything that you do, it needs to require that every single person takes part. Thinking back to health and safety culture and EDI culture and everybody having a responsibility for creating that is really important. And then finally, lead by example. Demonstrate the behaviour you expect from other people. So a really good case study on this is a construction company who increased their female apprentices from 4% to 17% in the course of 3 years. And they implemented a company-wide policy that did not tolerate workplace banter. And this was supported by training for every single person in the organisation, from senior management all the way to brand new apprentices that were recruited into the organisation. And that was also accompanied by non-judgmental conversations around why this is important, why workplace banter can't take place, and the negative impacts this can sometimes have. They found that not only did women apprentices, the recruitment and retention of them increase, but actually so did the overall retention of apprentices in general, because this created a better working environment for absolutely everybody involved. They also found that by encouraging mixing of senior management with other members of staff and apprentices during informal breaks and lunchtime helped with this a lot. Sorry. Because what this did is it meant that teams or groups of people weren't siloed and cliques in the organisation didn't begin to form. And that meant that people were much more comfortable interacting with each other, building relationships with each other, and there was no in-out group that can sometimes form in workplaces. And if what you're looking for is you're looking for a holistic approach to creating a positive workplace culture around equality, diversity and inclusion, there's a free tool out there already called the Inclusive Value Tool, and that can help you provides a tailored approach to addressing and improving equality, diversity and inclusion in your workplace. What the tool does is that it sends out a form to all of your employees, and they fill out up to 70 questions around how they feel about their workplace, any policies or practices, and it's all anonymous. You'll then receive that feedback back, and it will have tailored recommendations on what you should do to address any issues that have arisen, or it demonstrates where you're doing really, really well in your organisation already. So that was kind of a whistle-stop tour of workplace culture and why it's important to have positive workplace culture, and hopefully give you a little bit of an insight in how to get that started. Our next session is going to be on inclusive recruitment, which will have a lot more practical solutions to recruiting more women and other underrepresented groups into your organisation. So we're going to look at what is inclusive recruitment. We're going to look at language and bias in your job adverts. We're going to look at mitigating bias in the recruitment process. And we're going to look at practical solutions to improving your recruitment process as well.
Great, thank you.
Have questions?
Yeah, we've got some questions here, right. So I'll just make a start. So this could also, we would welcome all the attendees to put their answers into the box on these questions as well. So what effects has COVID had on diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so good question. And across the board, it is clear that women are taking the brunt of things like childcare, and women are telling us that they're stressed and they are not sure about the future of their career right now. So we're seeing huge disparity in the number of women versus men who are dropping out of the workforce as well, and that's actually across all sectors. In STEM in particular, so women, in regards to men and women and where they work, women are more likely to be in low paid and less secure roles across the UK. In STEM, women are not dropping out at as greater rates of the workforce as they are in other sectors, because STEM is seen as a much more stable and secure industry just now. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't women who are disproportionately being furloughed, disproportionately being made redundant as well.
Thank you. Can you explain or expand a bit more on the Inclusive Value Toolkit, please?
Yes. So the Inclusive Value Toolkit is essentially an auditing tool. So if what it is that you're trying to do is you want to look at the areas where you need to improve in your organisation, you can use this free tool by asking your employees for their feedback. Where is it that we need to do better as an organisation? Do you want more free time, for example? Do we need better policies and practices when it comes to recruitment? Are women finding, or other groups actually finding, that they get to certain stages in their career and then they can't progress? Like the Inclusive Value tool will help you identify some of those in an anonymous way, so you can get real feedback that people feel happy to provide, and they don't feel like they could potentially get a negative response, which is what I've spoken about today. So I would definitely encourage you to look at the Inclusive Value tool and use that. You can also use it as many times as you want. You can take an audit of your company, you can make the changes that the tool recommends. You can take another audit of the company and see if it's worked, see if it's not, see if you need to improve in other places. Because as organisations evolve, company culture evolves too. So it's constant.
Great. And I guess this one kind of follows on from that. Where can people find more information of best practice and how they can kind of implement these into their organisations?
Yeah, so I know I work for Equate Scotland, but I cannot recommend our resources enough. We have a lot of resources on our website for employers around different aspects of equality and diversity and inclusion. So next week is going to be about recruitment practices, and I really hope I'm going to, or I will be providing some practical solutions on those. But there's other resources on the Equate Scotland website that look at workplace culture, that look at a little bit of information about how to address unconscious bias and mitigating bias in other areas of the organisation. So I would definitely point you there.
Great. Another question from the audience. Aileen, do you have any opinions on why we have the leaky pipe in STEM? Why are young people so biased against these industries?
So that is a good question, and I could be here all day answering that. But we have an issue because we have gender stereotypes around men's jobs and women's jobs in our society, and this starts even before children are born. So if blue is for boys, pink is for girls, and as children grow up, they then we segregate the toys that they have. So you will have trucks and diggers for boys, and kitchens and Barbies for girls. And you can see this if you go into any shop. It is divided. If you go to Christmas time and you go to any shop that sells toys, it'll be girls' toys on one side, boys' toys on the other side. And then you see it in clothes. We have boys' clothes, girls' clothes, etc. So you see that all the way up as children grow up, and it's actually 6 years old when they start to really internalize these things, where they start to see that this is not for me. in the language that you see in books, on televisions and TV characters, like the culture around gender and what is for who is very stark. So you get that, and then when you get to the age of, when we talk about the Leaky pipeline, you get to school age, girls are often seen like, I'm not good at maths, I'm not good at physics, I'm not good at, so then they gravitate away from those subjects. But that's not true. They actually perform just as well, if not equally, in those subjects. And then, you know, society then tells you more messages and more messages about what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a man. And we need to, if we're really going to address it on a real structural cultural level, then we need to address what these messages is, and you need to address it from lots of different areas. But there's a huge emphasis and responsibility for employers to make sure that those messages aren't reinforced in the workplace. Like, we've come a long way in gender equality in the workplace. We need to keep moving forward, and there's a huge responsibility on employers to not only maintain that, but also pave the way there too.
Great, thank you. And what practical measures can we take as a trade body to promote diversity and inclusion?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah. What practical measures can we take as a trade body to promote diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so good question. So so making sure women are visible in the industry, is role models are extremely important. Making sure employers are, can you just explain to me for a second the role of a trades body, just so I can.
Yeah, I think the question's just basically asking, like what you're saying, what kind of things can they implement, what ED&I can they implement into their organisation just now?
Yeah, okay, so making sure women are visible, making sure women are available, know about opportunities to progress in their career, making sure that men know about the policies and practices that are available around flexible working, around family leave, around parental leave, making it acceptable for everybody, regardless of their gender, to be able to access family-friendly working policies and practices is really important, because at the end of the day, we're not going to create change in this sector unless we have both genders on board. So yeah, those would be my recommendations.
Great, thank you. I think that is all of our questions today. So just like to say thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope you got a lot out of this session and can take any learnings back to your organisation, and the handouts as well. Hopefully they're a bit of a starting point for you. Thank you to Aileen for taking us through the session, and Danielle from behind the scenes for making everything run so smoothly. As Aileen said, we have our second session next week, so we hope that you'll be able to join us. So this is on Thursday the 25th of February at 10 AM, where we'll kind of take on to the next stage of the D&I programme with Aileen. And yes, so enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks and goodbye.